Yo, what's up guys, Alf here, and today I'm going to be doing a new video in the Under the Meta series where I break down a deck that I think is very strong and has a lot of potential, but isn't quite top tier for whatever reason. I'm going to be breaking down all the card choices, talking about the weaknesses of the deck that I think are holding it back from being at the very top tier, and then we got some gameplay at the end as well so you guys can see the deck in action. And now very quickly before I get into it, if you want to try this list out for yourself, I'll have an importable deck list down in the description, and I've also already made a Brews from Scratch video about the core of this deck, which basically shows the deck building process from the very start. So if you're interested in seeing the deck building process, or you want to see how this build differentiates from the build I had in that video, I'll have a link to that down in the description as well. But anyway, with that all out of the way, this is an updated historic Esper Invocation lock build, and if you're not familiar with the core of this deck, it's kind of built around two main cards in Chakra Meditation and Estrid's Invocation. So Chakra Meditation, the idea with this is we cast it on turn 3 and rebuy an instant or sorcery from our graveyard, and we have a lot of cheap instants and sorceries to ensure that we can consistently get value off this when we cast it on turn 3. Then if we cast Estrid's Invocation, we can copy the Chakra Meditation, which gets us back another instant or sorcery, and then it blinks itself every upkeep. So basically, once we have this set up, we get to rebuy the most impactful instant or sorcery from our graveyard every single turn cycle. And the main two that we're trying to abuse with this are Orim's Chant and Silence, which if we cast during the opponent's upkeep, we basically just shut them off from casting sorcery speed stuff for the rest of the game. And Orim's Chant is even better because if the opponent already has creatures in play before we set up the lock, we can then just repeatedly kick the Orim's Chant to stop the opponent attacking as well. And this is actually really effective against a lot of the historic metagame right now. Apart from, instant speed graveyard hate or instant speed enchantment removal, most decks in historic can't really do much if you shut them off casting sorcery speed stuff and shut them off attacking for the rest of the game. So it often buys you a ton of time to then set up your own win condition in stuff like Fire Nation Occupation or Porcelain Portent, which you can then copy with other Estrid's Invocations to close the game out as well. So that's basically the general core of the deck. Now the big difference between this build and the previous one I had was the addition of Enlightened Tutor. So before I get into the details of this, I want to give a quick shout out to B. Craig Editanlin. Hope I've not butchered your name there, but they gave a suggestion in the Brews from Scratch video to try Enlightened Tutor in this list. Now, typically I'm not a massive fan of these sorts of cards. I think tutor effects that put cards on top of the library rather than into your hand have way more drawbacks. Obviously it draw locks yourself, which has its own issues, especially in terms of missing land drops, right? In this list, we're largely going to be using Enlightened Tutor to tutor for 3 drops, and if you don't already have your third land, it's an absolute nightmare trying to do this because then you're locking the top of your deck, delaying a land drop by at least an extra turn or so. So there are a lot of deck building issues if you do run these sorts of tutors. Not to mention it gives more opportunity for the opponent to interrupt it as well, right? If you put a card on top of your library and the opponent either mills you or uses a Ghost Quarter or Field of Ruin style effect, you're left with the decision of whether you lose a land or lose the card that you've tutored for, which is pretty awkward. But there are quite a lot of really cool stuff that this card can do in this specific list that I definitely think it's worth it here. So the biggest appeal to Enlightened Tutor in this list for me is that it can set up the lock all on its own, right? If you have Enlightened Tutor in 3 lands in your opening hand, you can go Enlightened Tutor on turn 1 or 2 to get Chakra Meditation. Then on turn 3 you can cast Chakra Meditation, buying back Enlightened Tutor, and then if you have the 4th land already, you can set a stop during your upkeep before the next draw phase, use Enlightened Tutor to put Estrid's Invocation on top before you draw, then draw it, cast the Estrid's Invocation, copy the Chakra Meditation, and then you're off to the races as well, right? If you've already used an Orim's Chant or a Silence in the first couple turns, you've got the full lock set up. If not, at worst, you can get Enlightened Tutor to then try and find some interaction, like Momentum Breaker, which you can then copy with Estrid's Invocation, for example. So Enlightened Tutor basically enabling the entire combo lock on its own is a really big deal. Not to mention, it also then enables us to not have to run, 4 Momentum Breaker and 4 Omen of the Sea to ensure that we get consistent use out of Estrid's Invocation, because, say, for example, we have an opening hand with 3 lands, Enlightened Tutor and Estrid's Invocation. If the opponent casts a creature, we can Enlightened Tutor for Momentum Breaker, then use Momentum Breaker on turn 2, and then use Estrid's Invocation to copy it and basically just lock the opponent out of, it will basically just force them to sacrifice a creature or discard a card every single turn, which is, that on its own can just solo the game against small creature decks, for example. And if they don't have any creatures, we can use Omen of the Sea, turn 1 Enlightened Tutor, grab Omen of the Sea, turn 2 Omen of the Sea, and then use Estrid's Invocation to just get value off that as well. And it also enables us to not have to run as many win conditions, right? If you you look at the Brews from Scratch video, I was on 4 Fire Nation Occupation by the end. Here we can just afford to run a single copy, which we can just tutor for with Enlightened Tutor when we're ready to start closing the game out. And it also enables us to run a secondary win condition in Pause Important, which I also like running here as well, because it gives us a way to remove big creatures without really being reliant on Momentum Breaker. Because if the opponent does cheat a big creature into play, and they have a couple of small ones as well, it's really difficult to actually take out the creature you need, whereas Pause Important basically gives you a tutorable removal for any card, which then you can follow up with a win condition and provide you artifact and enchantment hate because of First Little Pig as well. So Enlightened Tutor, really, really big at just in setting up the combo, really big at helping to find that. And we also have some sideboard cards that are very useful to be able to grab as well. We've got Pithing Needle, which is obviously good against a variety of combo decks and just, engine cards in general. We've got Torpor Orb and Unlicensed Hearse as well, which work very well with Enlightened Tutor because we can just cast Enlightened Tutor on turn 1, put these on top of the library, and then assuming we've got a second land, we can just cast these on curve on turn 2, which is really huge as well. So, like I said, I don't typically like tutor effects that put stuff on the top, but this one does so much in this list, especially just single-handedly setting up the loop on its own, that I definitely feel like it's worth it for me. And then in terms of the other cards, obviously, For Orum's Chant, For Silence is great in the early game at just slowing the opponent down entirely. The whole idea with these cards in the first couple of turns is we use these on turn 1 and 2 if we have them to just stop the opponent setting up their early game whatsoever, which then buys us more time to set up the loop. Once these are already in the graveyard, once we do get our chakra meditations and stuff online, it's much easier to then get the final loop set up. Not to mention, it also makes us much less vulnerable to surgical extraction if we have 2 of these style of effects, right? If we're trying to loop Silence and the opponent surgicals it, we can still dig for Orum's Chant to lock the opponent out as well. So it provides the deck with a lot more resilience, and just generally, I think these are just the best cards in the early game to slow the opponent down, and then we want them in the graveyard for the meditation Invocation loop. Anyway, Fatal Push, again, I feel like you need to have a lot of interaction, especially in a deck that is trying to play the long game, and so having access to Fatal Push early on is great. And then again, even if we don't have Orum's Chant or Silence, looping Fatal Push with the Meditation Invocation loop is really, really good against decks like Auras and Wizards and sometimes Energy and stuff like that as well. So Fatal Push really good at just helping us get to the lock, especially against the fast creature decks, which, Val, Auras, Energy, there's a lot of good fast creature decks right now, so I feel you need Fatal Push to just buy time against those sorts of decks. And then Ponder, again, in my Brews from Scratch video, I ended up swapping these out for Consider because of the interaction with Fire Nation Occupation, but Ponder's just much better, especially in a list like this where we're digging for specific cards. And one of the changes I've had to make is running more lands in the mana base to account for Enlightened Tutor draw locking us, and so having Ponder to help us find Enlightened Tutor in the first place, having Ponder to help us find some of the engine cards when we do have a high land count helps us avoid flooding out more, which is a big deal. And also there is some nice interaction with Ponder and Enlightened Tutor where if the other 2 cards that you see off Ponder aren't very good, we can just put Enlightened Tutor to the top of those 3, not shuffle, and then use Enlightened Tutor before we draw to shuffle away the other 2 cards that we see as well. So that's kind of a nice interaction there as well. Then the 2 drops, like I said, in my previous build, I was running 4 Omen of the Sea for Momentum Breaker because they're so good with Invocation. Here we can afford to run one-offs because Enlightened Tutor can help find them when we need them, but they don't clunk up our hands. These are only really good if you have Invocation. Momentum Breaker, obviously forcing the opponent to discard is a really nice stopgap on that as well, but there are certain matchups where that's not exactly the best. Not to mention as well that our end game is trying to stop the opponent casting spells, which will leave them with a lot of cards in hand. So against that, Momentum Breaker kind of pulls in the opposite direction if the opponent doesn't have any creatures in play. But still, these are still very useful cards. Omen of the Sea, very useful to loop with Invocation, and it also provides us with a mana sink to use the Firebending mana on if we've already got Fire Nation or Occupation in play, both in terms of flashing in Omen of the Sea before combat ends to make use of the mana, and also pumping 2 of the Firebending mana into the Sacrifice ability if we need to scry as well. The Momentum Breaker, like I've said, very, very good against small creature decks. This plus Invocation can just win the game on its own against the small creature decks. And then, like I said, having the stopgap of it making the opponent discard when you're up against a deck that doesn't have creatures is also a very nice line to take in certain situations as well. Then I also really like having access to Temporary Lockdown as a tutor target off Enlightened Tutor, not just against the Val decks like Auras, Energy and Val combo, where it does just sweep their entire board outside of Luris, but it also just gives us a way to deal with certain hate cards that can stop the combo as well, if especially graveyard hate like Rest in Peace or any of the artifact based graveyard hate. So I feel like this is a great card to have access to game one, especially against the Lurrus decks, and obviously we've got extra ones in the sideboard because it is very effective in a number of matchups. Then Fire Nation Occupation, this is going to be our main win condition, so once we set up the Chakra Meditation Invocation loop and we're locking the opponent out of casting stuff, then we can use Enlightened Tutor to tutor for Fire Nation Occupation, and then not only do we get a 2/2, we can copy it with Invocation if we want, and then every time we cast something during the opponent's turn, you know, like an Orim's Chant or Silence during the upkeep, we get more tokens as well. Once we've got a second Esprid's Invocation, we can start copying Fire Nation Occupation to then double up on the tokens during the opponent's upkeep to actually turn the corner pretty quickly once we've got this online. So this is the main win condition. And then we've also got Portent, which, like I said, tutorable card that can remove bigger creatures, and then the Portent gives us more main deck access to artifacts and enchantment removal from the first little pig, and obviously you have some other options as well. But once we have this in play, if we copy it with Invocation every single turn, we can get another pig. The second copy that we get off Invocation also provides another buff for our pigs as well, so again enables us to close the game out. Very, very rarely go for the third little pig, but first little pig giving you access to artifact and enchantment removal, very useful, and then second little pig giving you access to flying is good both on offense if the opponent already has ground creatures in play, and on defense if they have flying creatures, like if you're against Izzet Wizards, for example. And then in terms of the mana base, like I said, one of the big changes that I've made here is going up on lands to account for Enlightened Tutor. I honestly think you need a very high land count to even consider running this, especially in a deck like this where we need to have our third land because we're primarily going to be using this to tutor Chakra Meditation. So we absolutely need third land every single game for Enlightened Tutor to be playable. And then, like I said, the loop that we're trying to set up where we go tutor for meditation, cast meditation, buy it back. We ideally want to be able to cast meditation to cast Enlightened Tutor again during the upkeep before the next draw step, which then involves us naturally drawing our fourth land on curve as well. And not to mention, you know, a lot of the time we need the fourth land. So say, for example, we go Chakra Meditation, rebuy Orim's Chant or Silence. If we then want to set up the loop next turn, we need the fourth land to go Invocation and then still have another white mana spare to use the Silence or Orim's Chant during the opponent's upkeep. So in this list, we really, really need to be drawing our fourth land on curve every single time. Now, obviously, we do have some cards that can help us do that, like Ponder, Omen of the Sea, for example, but we really do want to be consistently drawing our fourth land on curve. Not to mention we do have a lot of good mana sinks as well. So I feel like going up to 27 lands is really important for Enlightened Tutor to be playable in this list. Then in terms of the lands themselves, the ones that might stand out here is why I'm running Ancient Den, Seat of the Synod, and Vault of Whispers, and that is also to provide extra utility off Enlightened Tutor, because say we have two Enlightened Tutors and we want to go Meditation for one of them. If we're missing our third land drop, we can use one Enlightened Tutor to put one of these on top because they're artifacts, and having one of each also helps to fix our mana, right? If we need a second white for temporary lockdown, for example, or for kicking Orim's Chant, we can get Ancient Den. If we don't have blue already, we can get Seat of the Synod. If we don't have black already, we can get Vault of Whispers as well. So this provides extra utility for the Enlightened Tutor. Again, it's never great to have to use Enlightened Tutor for a land, but there will be some draws where you just want to do it to ensure that you can hit your third or fourth land drop to set the lock up, and it's definitely felt worth running these to do that. You do need to be wary though that the opponent can use Fragment Reality on these, so it's best to wait as long as possible to play this. It's generally best to play this as the last land that you have in your hand, but still, I feel like it's worth it to, you know, give us more utility off the Enlightened Tutor. Then outside of that, we've got Otawara here. I've decided to go down to one basic because I haven't really seen as many Field of Ruin style decks recently, so I feel like we can get away with one basic, but you definitely don't want to go below that in case you do run into some Field of Ruin stuff. But basically replace the basic island with Otawara just to give us more outs to Planeswalkers and stuff like that, which are kind of tricky to deal with this list. And then the rest of the mana base is basically, you know, some fast lands and you know, the shock lands as well. Chose to focus on mainly white lands because we do need double white for Orim's Chant, and especially with Enlightened Tutor being a key part of the deck as well. You often need double white to go, for example, Enlightened Tutor and then still have white up to use Silence or Orim's Chant next turn. And then while I did say in the Brews from Scratch video that I don't love running any pain lands in this list because we need to be able to use the mana every single turn, and if you're having to use, you know, if Silent Clearing is your only your second source of white, you're going to be taking a damage every single turn if you're kicking Orim's Chant using the mana to do that. But as we're going up to 27 lands, I felt like I needed some utility lands as a way to sort of mitigate against flood a little bit more. And then the other change I've made here is running Kahira as the companion. Again, I want to give a shout out to Richard Fitkin, who commented on my Brews from Scratch video suggesting Kahira. And this was such a great suggestion because it's basically free to run and provides you with another win condition, right? If the opponent's playing mill and they mill over both your win conditions, you're still going to have Kahira to close the game out. If they, kill the occupation, you can't get Portent, it gives you a way to close the game out as well. And it's basically free to run. The only kind of clash you could have here is against Fragment Reality. We obviously have no creatures, and I did consider running a 1-mana creature or a 2-mana creature in the sideboard so that if the opponent does use Fragment Reality on your Esward's Invocation, you still get a creature. But this does kind of limit the type of creatures you could run in that slot. But again, definitely still worth running because it's basically free to run and provides you with another win condition. So that's the main deck. Moving on to the sideboard, like I said, these are basically here as one of choose targets for Enlightened Tutor. Pithing Needle has so many different matchups you could bring it in against, but the main one that does come up is stuff like Goblin Bombardment against Energy, for example. Torpor Orb, obviously going to be good against any deck full of ETB, so Boros Energy, Val combo. There's a bunch of more fringe creature decks as well that are very focused on ETBs. I've come across the Samwise combo a couple of times recently, and this is excellent there. So being able to go Enlightened Tutor on turn 1, grab Torpor Orb, just guarantee play it early against those decks like Energy is really powerful at just limiting the opponent's proactive game plan. And then Unlicensed Hearse, obviously, there's a variety of graveyard hate that you could run, but the reason I've gone for Enlightened Hearse here is because, like I said, a very key curve out that we're trying to do here is Enlightened Tutor on 1 into your graveyard hate on turn 2, so it being 2 mana as opposed to 1 isn't really much of a drawback here because we're hoping to cast it on turn 2. And Unlicensed Hearse, obviously, there's a variety of cards you could use here. We can't really use Rest in Peace, which is one of the best cards against Jund, for example, because it interferes with our own proactive game plan. We need to be able to use our own graveyard. But Unlicensed Hearse is good against the majority of graveyard decks anyway, but it's specifically very good against Jund, because if you can get this down on turn 2, exiling 2 cards a turn, limits what they can do with Jarsil. Obviously, against Barrogoyf and Pyrogoyf, you're not going to target your own graveyard as much, but exiling 2 cards a turn really limits the size of their Goyfs. Not to mention, a lot of builds are running Fear of Missing Out and Detective's Phoenix as well, where Unlicensed Hearse is really good. So Jund can be a tricky matchup because of their discard spells and Abrupt Decay being able to take out your enchantments. So yeah, Unlicensed Hearse really good at slowing down their proactive game plan. Not to mention it's obviously great against more all-in graveyard decks like Reanimator as well. Then we've got 3 more copies of Temporary Lockdown, which is not only great against the Lurrus decks like I've said, but I also like bringing this in against Eldrazi as well, because Eldrazi do have some hate cards that are specifically very good against you as well, namely Chalice of the Void. Chalice of the Void on X=1 is even better against this build than the previous one, because you've now got Enlightened Tutor in addition to your Orm's Chant, Silence, Ponder and other stuff as well. So Temporary Lockdown not only gives us a, it's flexible in that it can be good against Lurrus decks, but also it does give us a good answer against Chalice of the Void X=1, that even if the opponent removes the lockdown, they'll get Chalice back, but it will be on X=0, so then it doesn't really affect you anymore. Not to mention, it will also incidentally take out their Utopia Sprawl, their Talisman, and any spawn tokens that they get off Kozilek's Command or Flesh Raker or whatever as well. So Lockdown actually very good against Eldrazi as well for what you need. Then High Noon, I really, really like this card specifically against Lotus Field. I feel like game 1, you do have Orm's Chant, Silence, which is very good against them, but outside of that, Lotus Field can race pretty effectively. So post-sideboard, especially when they're going to have more counterplay to what you're doing, I feel like High Noon is a really good way of just locking them out of the game, ensuring that they can't combo off, and helping you buy time to set up your win condition, because Lotus Field is a deck that if you give it time, especially if you're not applying pressure, which this deck isn't particularly good at doing early in the game, they will find ways back into the game. And once they have their Lotus Field set up, all they need is a way to, clear the way for them to combo for the turn, and you basically lose on the spot a lot of the time. And then finally, we've got 4 Leyline of Sanctity, which is, first of all, very good against the Valakut decks. Valakut is another concern that I've got for this particular list, because it is quite dirtly. You don't actually turn the corner and close the game out until quite a while. And also, if you're shutting the opponent off casting sorcery speed spells, that doesn't stop them putting lands into play. So typically Valakut decks, especially if they've got an Exploration or a Burgeoning in play early, can just get Valakut online manually. And even if you have locked them out of the game, they can just keep casting mountains every single turn and pinging you out without even needing to cast any sorcery speed stuff. So Leyline of Sanctity protects against that. Also, their whole deck is pretty much built around Valakut in almost every single build I've seen. And so their ability to not go face with Valakut basically just stops them being able to win until they can remove the ley line. And then additionally, it's also very nice against the discard spell decks like Jund, for example, at, just preventing them from breaking apart your combo and forcing them to have stuff like Abrupt Decay to interact with what you're doing, because we don't really have any creatures that we're going to be casting earlier in the game as well. So that's the deck overall, and like I said, I'm really happy with the addition of Enlightened Tutor. Not only does it help us set up the lock a lot more consistently, but giving you game one consistent access to temporary lockdown against the Lurrus decks is absolutely huge. Giving you consistent access to Momentum Breaker if you already have Invocation to lock creature decks out like that is really huge. Giving you access to Porcine Portent to be able to kill bigger creatures is really nice. Not to mention more consistent access to the sideboard cards as well. So I really like this build of the deck for sure, but it still does have some weaknesses. And for me, there are two main weaknesses that are holding this deck back from being a top tier deck. First of all is just an over-reliance on the engine cards, right? Once you have these set up, you do completely take over the game, but if the opponent can disrupt you, setting these up with discard spells, counter spells, or enchantment removal, then you can be left with just a bunch of silence effects, and then you're just going to run out of gas unless you happen to, hit another engine card or find a ponder and then use that to find an engine card. So if the opponent can keep you off your engine cards, the deck kind of does fizzle out a little bit. And then secondly, the other issue I've got is it doesn't really have great counterplay to proactive instant speed stuff. So counter spells, it did take me a little while to figure this out, but counter spells aren't as much of an issue with this list. Like I said, getting your engine cards disrupted by counter spells can be absolutely backbreaking, but if you are against a counterspell deck, you can just use your Silent or Orange Chant preemptively during your turn, right? Say, for example, you have Meditation in play and you want to cast Invocation, but you're worried about counterspells. If you just lead on Silence during your turn, if that resolves, the opponent can't cast any counterspells, so then you can just use Invocation, get it online, and then you're good to go. But outside of that, proactive instant speed cards like Kozilek's Command, for example, or Chord of Calling are really difficult to play around, because even if you cast Silence during your turn, during your main phase, the opponent can just respond with their proactive card and you don't really have a good way to stop that. And then past that, instant speed enchantment removal is also basically impossible for us to play around, especially stuff like Boseiju that doesn't need to be cast, right? They can still use that after a Silence or an Orange Chant, for example. That's particularly an issue because, like I said, you have an over-reliance on your engine cards, and you don't have a good way to stop instant speed enchantment removal. So, say, for example, you have a Meditation in play, and you're about to cast you're casting an Invocation to try and copy it. If the opponent then uses Boseiju to kill the Chakra Meditation, Estrid's Invocation can enter with no targets, which does still enter play, but it doesn't blink itself anymore. It basically is just a useless enchantment at that point. So, you don't really have good counterplay to instant speed enchantment removal, and if this deck becomes more popular, people are going to run instant speed enchantment removal, which then makes the deck really difficult to play, especially if people go as far to run stuff like Back to Nature as well. So those are the main two issues I've got with the deck that are holding it back from being top tier. If you had good counterplay to that, and let me know in the comments if you do have any suggestions for counterplay to either of those issues, then I think this deck could really compete, because when the opponent doesn't have the right type of interaction to stop your lock, you just completely take over the game, even against the best decks in the format. But like I said, over-reliance on the engine cards and a lack of counterplay to proactive instant speed cards are what I feel are holding the deck back. So next up, I've got some gameplay with the deck so you guys can see the deck in action. Like I said, if you've got any questions about the deck or any suggestions for how to make it better, definitely let me know in the comments. Either way, hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Big up! Okay, so we're on the play here, and I'm going to keep this one. If the opponent has a discard spell, we're in trouble, but Orim's Chant into Enlightened Tutor is actually really nice, because we can go Orim's Chant turn 1, then Enlightened Tutor for Chakra Meditation next turn, Chakra Meditation on turn 3, rebuy the Enlightened Tutor, and then Enlightened Tutor for Estrid's Invocation. So, oh, and Silence is a nice pickup as well, because now we can use our mana efficiently and basically just cancel out the opponent's first 2 turns as well. So, this is why I really like having Enlightened Tutor in the deck, because it can just single-handedly set up the whole core of your deck on its own. So now we'll Enlightened Tutor for Chakra Meditation. And now this turn, so I'm not sure what the opponent's on exactly here, but I'm going to use the Shockland rather than the Seat of the Synod, just in case they're running Fragment Reality, because otherwise they could use Fragment Reality on the Seat of the Synod and just Stone Rain me at instant speed for a mana, which would be, a bit of a nightmare, considering that's kind of avoidable. Okay, Fanatic of Owner. So it looks like we're probably against Devotion here, if I had to guess. We get a free loot off the Chakra Meditation, put away the fast land, and then we can get Estrid's Invocation. And since we've already used Silence and Orum's Chant, we should just be good to lock the opponent out from next turn. And unless they can get Khan down into Haywire Might this turn, I don't think... Well, I guess actually Boseiju would also do it, but typically Devotion doesn't run more than 1 or 2 copies in the main deck max, depending on their build. And it looks like they're on the Selesnya build, which probably only runs a single Boseiju. So unless they have an absolutely insane turn here, I think we should actually be all right. Okay, Badger Mole Cub. So they've still got 2 mana available here. Okay, and another Badger Mole Cub. So it's kind of lucky that we do have access to Orum's Chant already, because otherwise we'd be taking a decent chunk of damage every single turn. So here I'm going to get Enlightened Tutor just because we already have Orum's Chant. We already have the lock set up, so I might as well use the Enlightened Tutor already to grab Fire Nation Occupation, unless we happen to draw it here. So here I think we've already got enough lands, and Fatal Push could be useful, depending on what the opponent does here. But I think we should still be good. Like I said, they've got very few ways to disrupt this. So go for Enlightened Tutor here, see what we draw. I think since we have Orum's Chant already, we don't really need the Fatal Push as much. And I'm going to get Chakra Meditation just in case they do find the Boseiju in time. But here, now since we have 5 mana... we can get Fire Nation Occupation and still have enough mana here to kick Orum's Chant. So we'll rebuy the Orum's Chant. Just want to make sure that we don't leave the blue, Seat of the Synod untapped, because otherwise we won't have double white for the Orum's Chant and the opponent could start attacking in. Although now we're starting to produce tokens, that's less relevant here. But yeah, now we can go for Orum's Chant again, get another token off the Fire Nation Occupation, loot twice, and the looting here is actually very nice at helping us find stuff. Okay, nice. So, actually, thinking about it, maybe I'm supposed to keep Chakra Meditation here, like I said, in case they find Boseiju. That's probably the only out. So, I think I made a bit of a mistake there. I probably should have kept the Chakra Meditation. But again, we've got Omen of the Sea here to help dig us towards more Orum's Chance if we need. So, at this point, I think we can start attacking, right? Because we're going to be kicking the Orum's Chant. We're going to be producing more tokens here, so... might as well start applying pressure. There's nothing at instant speed. You know, they're not playing Collected Company or Chord of Calling that we have to worry about them putting bigger creatures into instant speed, really. So we'll see if they... I mean, presumably they block with the Fanatic. I'm just not sure if they'll block with anything else here. And since we've got the mana from the Firebending, we could also use Omen of the Sea now for essentially 1 mana, because we can use the floating mana on the Omen of the Sea, but... the counterpoint to that is if we wait until the opponent's end step, we have more information to be able to scry, and we'll get an additional token off the Fire Nation Occupation. So it just depends on what we want to do with our mana this turn, really. Okay, so opponent in the tank about the blocks. Yeah, they block with Fanatic, let the 2 damage through, which is kind of what I expected. I'm going to hold on to the Omen of the Sea, and I'm going to hold on to the Silent Clearing as well to loot away if we find something better. And I'm going to wait on the Omen of the Sea because I want to do it during the opponent's turn so that we get an extra token, so we can close the game out a little bit quicker. I think we can afford to pitch Silence. You know, game 1 against Devotion, like I said, they've got very few cards that can actually disrupt it. So I think Omen of the Sea is more valuable here to just get more tokens on the board and also give us another potential option off the Invocation if we need to, you know, find more stuff. Okay, so here we can Fatal Push, you know, the Fanatic or the Badger Mole Cub. I'm going to go for the Fanatic. Oh, no, wait, actually, that will give them the opportunity to bring it back as a 4/4, and it doesn't count as casting either, so I'm probably supposed to take out the Badger Mole Cub instead, thinking about it, but yeah, I basically just wanted to get a creature off the board so that we can close the game out as quickly as possible and not, you know, well, give the opponent as little time as possible to find Boseiju, which is basically their only out at this point, I think. But either way, we're attacking him for 10 here. So I feel like, I mean, they're probably forced into blocks relatively soon, if not this turn. If I was the opponent, I would probably be trading with everything at this point because otherwise my clock is just going to increase, right? Just leaving my 2/2s in play is going to mean that next turn's going to be even more brutal for them. So we'll see how they block, though. And then afterwards... I mean, we could use this mana to scry with Omen of the Sea
for a single blue. But I already feel like we're in a good spot. We've already looted through a ton of cards. So I think instead I might just put Kahira into hand, and then we should still have enough mana for Orum's Chant kicking. And then I want to keep the Concealed Courtyard to loot away if we find something better off the Chakra Meditation, the looting effects. So put it in the tank here. I mean, I don't know what decision points they've got really here. Again, it could be Boseiju potentially. So maybe I made a mistake not keeping hold of that Chakra Meditation just to give us a backup here. But I think with 2 Orum's Chants, we don't need it as such, right? Even if they take out the Chakra Meditation or the Estrid's Invocation here, we still have 2 Orum's Chants ready, basically. I just want to make sure as well that I tap the seat so that we have, the kicker available here. And the nice thing about this matchup is they don't really sideboard very much, so I don't think they should be able to bring in as much counterplay to us. So here I think we can loot away the lands. We still have enough mana to go Invocation into or kick Orum's Chant again. Although here the opponent, like I said, can bring back the Fanatic of Ronus, which is a bit of an issue, but I don't think it'll end up making too much of a difference. I probably should have just taken out the Badger Mole Cub instead. And now we'll just attack. They obviously have to block here. And they don't really have good blocks. Obviously, we're going to lose a 2-2 to the 4-4, but, we've still got 10 damage. They have to block with at least, 1 Badger Mole Cub, presumably. Oh, wow. Okay, yeah, they just die here. So that felt really good. And again, I think this should be a good matchup. As long as they don't have a high density of Boseiju or they get Khan down early, I think we should be good. So in terms of sideboarding, I think I do want to bring in Torpor because that does slow a lot of their draws down. And if we don't have a clear Enlightened Tutor line, we can just go Tutor on turn 1 for Torpor, and then that shuts off Outcast Liberator, it shuts off Cavalier of Thorns, it shuts off the draw ability of Kiora as well. So I think it's worth, having just in case, you have those draws where you have a couple of Ponders and Enlightened Tutor and you don't have the combo, but just having access to Torpor means that hand is a lot more keepable because you can go Enlightened Tutor for Torpor, get Torpor in play, which then slows the opponent down, and then you've got more time for your Ponders to dig towards the other stuff. But if we do have, part of the combo, or we have Silence or Orum's Chant in the early few turns, then I think we're likely going to use Enlightened Tutor like we did last game to just get the combo online. But like I said, having the option of grabbing Torpor if we need it, or just, sometimes incidentally drawing it is nice as well. So, yeah, I think it's worth doing here. In terms of cards they can bring in, I mean, again, if they've got extra Boseijus in the sideboard, then that could be a problem. If they've got Fast Start to get a Khan down and then get Haywire Might, that could be a problem. But we've got Orum's Chant here. We've got Chakra Meditation to get it back. We've got Ponder to hopefully find us an Invocation. So we'll Orum's Chant here because, they could do a lot this turn, right? They could cast Outcaster into another thing. They could cast Fanatic of Ronus. Oh, okay. I was going to say that's a little bit annoying because we didn't really slow them down that turn because they still could plot the Liberator, but, we've drawn another Orum's Chant here, which is really nice. Here we've got Invocation, so we're definitely going to keep that one. And I think we want to draw the Seachrome Coast first so that we can play it untapped. And then we obviously want to set a stop to use Orum's Chant. And then next turn, we can go Chakra Meditation, rebuy Orum's Chant. And then they have a single turn then to try and get themselves into the game. So here, like I said, we'll go Seachrome Coast into Chakra Meditation, rebuy Orum's Chant. And now, this is a bit of a concern because they could have an explosive turn here. They could get Khan into Haywire Might, which would stop us. But if they don't have an insane turn here, we can just go Estrid's Invocation, copy Meditation, get back another Orum's Chant during the upkeep. They can attack us for one combat phase, but we're at 17, so they would need to have an absolutely crazy turn this turn to really make much of a difference. Now, having said that, Devotion can have crazy turns, especially, they have got access to a decent amount of mana here, so if they go Kiora, untap, Outcaster, somehow find a way to get Storm the Festival, then we could be in trouble. But I think, on average, we should be all right in this spot. So they do have 4 mana here, plus an extra one with the Outcaster. Okay, there is Kiora, so they can untap the Utopia Sprawl land. They can also untap the Mana Dorks, which would give them access to 2 mana as well. But I think we should be good here, right? Unless, even if they go Karn, I don't think that's good enough, because they can go Karn, Tormod's Crypt, but there's not an opportunity where they can lock us out of the lock, because if we go Espid's Invocation, rebuy Orim's Chant, they're forced to then crack it. Oh, well, they do have Karn. But like I said, I think since we have the second Orim's Chant here, we should actually be fine. Because if they use Tormod's Crypt on the Invocation trigger, then we just cast Orim's Chant that we have in our hand, and then we just have the loop set anyway. And if they don't, then we're in the same spot again where we get to rebuy an Orim's Chant. So they're kind of forced to crack the Tormod's Crypt here. But since we have a second Orim's Chant, it's not going to actually be good enough, I don't think. And obviously they can minus Karn to get something else. Like, Planeswalkers are a potential, weak point for this deck, because even if we're silencing them or Orim's Chanting them, they can still activate the Planeswalker abilities. But thankfully, I don't think there's any artifacts that's commonly run in Devotion that have flash that they can play at instant speed in order to get around our Orim's Chant sort of stuff. So I think, unless they're running something really unusual here, that we should be good. So yeah, they're forced to crack the Tormod's Crypt now, but thankfully that doesn't really matter because we have the second Orim's Chant here. So I think the only thing we're really bothered about at this point now is Boseiju, right? If it gets to the upkeep, then they can obviously Boseiju the Estrid's Invocation, which would break apart the lock. But thankfully, Chakra Meditation does dig through a lot of our deck to help us find, a second Invocation to get around that. So we'll see what the opponent does here, or we'll see what they get with Karn. That's the first point of worry here, because if they do have a flash artifact, then we could be in trouble. But if they don't, if everything's sorcery speed, I don't think there's really anything outside of Boseiju that they can use to get out of this, really. I mean, we'll see what they get. So yeah, considering Boseiju is the one thing I'm worried about. Oh, Perilous Snare. Interesting. Okay, do they have white? Okay, well, I guess they have white off the Noble Hierarch anyway, but since it's sorcery speed, it doesn't really do much. Now, they do get to attack here, but again, we get to survive that, thankfully. And again, unless they have Boseiju, which it doesn't look like they do, because Zareen is giving away priority here. We just get Orim's Chant back. We've already got the backup one here as well. We've got Enlightened Shooter, which is a nice pickup here because that can help us find Invocation if they do find Boseiju, and we've already got a backup Orim's Chant available here, which is really nice. And we got Silence as well, but I feel like the Orim's Chant's better. We've already got 2, and so having the extra land here is going to be useful, I think. Torpor Orb is an interesting draw here, but I don't think we really need it right now. So, and I don't want to deal myself damage unnecessarily with the shock lands, so I'm going to use the Meditation, pitch the Fatal Push probably, and then actually I think I'm going to pitch the Torpor Orb because they can't cast anything. We're not really going to benefit from casting Torpor Orb at this point in the game, I don't think. And then okay, yeah, they plus the Karn, so they can get another card next turn potentially, but and this is a little risky. I'm going to use Enlightened Shooter here to try and find a oh, okay, we drew it. Sick. I was going to say to find Fire Nation Occupation. Now that I was going to say, using that and not getting a backup Invocation is a little bit risky. But now we've naturally drawn the Nation Occupation. This is really nice because now we have counterplay to the Boseiju, right? If they Boseiju our Invocation during their turn or during our upkeep, we have a backup now, and we have enough mana to cast the Invocation and still cast the Orim's Chant as well. So I think we should be good completely at this point, right? I think Boseiju is their only out, and we already have counterplay to it. Now we're starting to produce tokens as well. They don't have any creature with bigger than 2 toughness, so they can't even really trade with the tokens that we've got here. Plus, Invocation. Now we've got 1 Invocation copying Meditation. We can now use this second one to copy Fire Nation Occupation, which then means that we get 2 tokens every Orim's Chant that we cast. So it's going to help us, close the game out a lot quicker, which then, like I said, gives them fewer outs or fewer draw steps to find Boseiju, or, if they have some other instant speed enchantment interaction. Now, the one thing I'm worried about is that they could be on something like Back to Nature. I've seen a few green decks running that as counterplay for auras, but I think Devotion specifically would struggle to run that because they usually dedicate their whole sideboard to Karn. And if they do have sideboard cards, it's very specific stuff. Or not very specific, but I don't think if you're going to run actual sideboard cards in Devotion, Back to Nature wouldn't be anywhere near the top for me. I feel like you'd probably run Dismember or something to give you good counterplay to stuff like Auras and Wizards. And even then, I'm not really sure it's worth it because there's so much stuff that you can get with Karn. Interesting, they just kill the Karn here. They do get Haywire Might, but again, they just can't cast anything. I would presume, since Planeswalkers are the only thing they can actually use right now, they'd have probably plus the Karn first, but I guess they know that we can start attacking this turn as well. And I probably would have attacked the Karn down just to be safe, but yeah, we'll see. Oh, wow, okay, opponent actually did find the Boseiju, so us naturally drawing the Nation Occupation is actually a very big deal here, I think, because now we still have the lock available, right? We have the backup Invocation. We can just copy the Chakra Meditation again, so they're kind of forced to have the second Boseiju here, I think. Okay. So, going to set a stop so that we can do it during the upkeep. Well, Estrid's Invocation, Chakra Meditation to get back another Orim's Chant, just so if they do draw another Boseiju, we already have the backup Orim's Chant available. And I'm going to ignore the Kiora. There was, if they still had a Karn in play, I think there's a good argument to attacking that down instead. But Kiora's not really doing much here, and it has 6 loyalty, so that's going to be redirecting a lot of damage from face, which then, will buy them extra turns to find the second Boseiju if they have it. So here we'll discard the land, which we don't really need. And we'll discard another Meditation as well. And yeah, I think we should be good now. Like I said, if they're playing Selesnya, it's very difficult to fit 2 Boseijus in. Yeah, opponent just scoops up, so we got there. Nice. Okay, so we're on the play here. And, I'm tempted to keep this. If one of these other lands was a white land, that it wasn't a pain land, I'd be more interested in it. But I think we have to mulligan with only 1 white land and it being a pain land as well. So Gigantha could be a few things. But either way, we're going to lead on Orim's Chant turn 1 here, just because no matter what it is, we want to be able to restrict their turn 1 plays and just slow them down as much as possible. We'll see. Hopefully their land will give away what they're running. Because to be fair, there aren't that many Gigantha decks still. Okay, Steam Venser makes me think it's probably Izzet Wizards. And I don't think we want any of them with Chakra Meditation already. Ooh, okay, Invocation is a really, really nice draw here. Now we can go Meditation, get back Orim's Chant, and then Invocation. We've got the lock set up straight away, basically. Now, this could be tricky against Wizards. Yeah. Okay, Fatal Push. I actually think I'm going to go for Fatal Push here because waiting a turn on Chakra Meditation is actually quite... Well, it's pretty beneficial to us because we can Meditation for Orim's Chant and then still use Orim's Chant the same turn cycle, which is a pretty big deal. Wow, okay, they plot the show off, which is huge for us because now we can just delay the... them casting it for a turn with the Orim's Chant, and then if we can find another land drop here, we can then start kicking the Orim's Chant straight away. I was going to say the one issue here is that this turn, for example, the opponent is going to be able to cast instant speed stuff now, which will buff the Soulscar Mage. So if they have Burn, yeah, Wizard's Lightning or Flame of Anor, for example, is another one that would have been annoying. You know, it buffs them. So here I think we value the second Invocation over the Silence. If we'd found an untapped land, then I think we probably keep that over the Invocation, because we do want to be able to kick the Auram's Chant. But thankfully for now, we only have to worry about this Soulscar Mage. So again, want to make sure that we have white mana available after the Invocation. I don't think we really need to worry about main deck Spell Pierce. It's not really a very common card in Wizards at the moment anyway. Then upkeep will Auram's Chant again. Hopefully they don't have just a handful of burn. That would be pretty rough, but I think chances are we should be alright here. Really want to find an extra land if possible, though. I'm going to keep Silence over the third Invocation, just because in case they do have Spell Pierce, having a backup one immediately will be very useful, I think. Okay, so I think we should be good now, right? Because we can start kicking the Auram's Chant, which should just prevent, you know, a lot of damage. And this is kind of risky because I am shocking myself when they could have, you know, triple burn spell, whether that's Chain Lightning or Wizard's Lightning. But this does get us a lot closer to a win condition, which is the next thing we need to find before the opponent, you know, gets sorry, I just got to think about this. Yeah, before the opponent gets a high enough density of burn where they can just burn us out with instant speed burn potentially. But I mean, thankfully, the only instant speed burn that Wizards tend to run that can go face is Wizard Lightning, so they would need exactly the remaining 3 copies of Wizard Lightning, right? If Lightning Bolt was legal instead of Chain Lightning, then we'd have to worry about that as well. But as things stand, I think that's the only real way I see us losing this. Unless they have a random Spell Pierce. No, okay, opponent just scoops it up. So, yeah, that felt pretty good. Post-sideboard, though, I think they are more likely to have Spell Pierce or maybe into the Floodmore to bounce our stuff. But we also get Temporary Lockdown, which is really huge. And I think I'm just going to trim on Ponder. We want to keep the Fatal Pushes. We want to keep, obviously, Enlightened Tutor. We want to keep the 8 chance as well. I'm just trying to think whether Unlicensed Hearse is better than Ponder, but so little of their deck interacts with the graveyard. It's basically just Dreadhorde Arcanist now. If they were still on Reckless Charge, then I could see a little bit more of an argument for it, but that's largely been surpassed by Swiftspear's teachings here. So I think post-sideboard, I'm just trying to think of cards they're going to bring in. Spell Pierce is a major one for sure, because there were a couple points that game where, you know, they Spell Pierce our Estrid's Invocation or whatnot, then it's a bit of an issue. And unlike other counterspell decks like Draw Go, you can't really preemptively use your Silence or Auram's Chant during your turn to force your cards through counterspells. You kind of have to use it during the opponent's turn to stop them casting creatures, especially because they have not only haste threats but Swiftspear's teachings as well. So this hand definitely looks good. Definitely happy to keep this one, right? We've got the lock basically in hand already with some ways to delay and some early interaction as well. Okay, they've got Stone of Erech, but that's actually pretty good for us because it forces them to repeatedly hold 2 mana open, which is going to be really awkward for a low to the ground aggressive deck. I imagine there will be points in the game where they either have to... Wow, that seems like a complete waste of a Spell Pierce to me, unless they have a really powerful play they want to play alongside it. Okay, they did it to make way for Spell Pierce. That makes a little bit more sense, but either way, we can just... Fatal Push the Soulscar Mage now so that we're not vulnerable to instant speed burn spells like last game, and then we can Auram's Chant again here. Now, that is going to mean that they will have Stone of Erech available this turn, which is a bit annoying going into the Chakra Meditation turn, but oh wow, okay, perfect. That's so good. So now we can actually use the Chakra Meditation here. This does mean that they're going to get to cast the Slick Shot Show Off, but I don't think the loop is as important while they have Graveyard Hate in play. So I'm just going to rebuy the Fatal Push. So now if they do cast the Slick Shot Show Off, we have an immediate answer for it, which is really nice. And, you know, we can Enlighten Tutor for Temporary Lockdown. Oh, they just cracked this Stone of Erech. I mean, unless they're trying to draw another land or something, that doesn't really make much sense to me. Okay, they've got Show Off and Symmetry Sage here, so... I mean, thankfully we have Fatal Push for the Slick Shot Show Off into Invocation. And I think we'll pitch the Pain land here, and then we can go Invocation, rebuy the Fatal Push, and as you can see here, we don't even necessarily need the Orim's Chant. Rebuying Fatal Push every single turn is probably good enough against Wizards. I mean, obviously we've drawn the Orim's Chant here, which is perfect, but even if we didn't, we could probably just keep them out of the game rebuying Fatal Push all the time. Although they do have another show off. Okay, iteration, I mean, this should mean we're alright, hopefully, I think. I'm going to set a stop during the upkeep so that we can Fatal Push and then rebuy Fatal Push with the Chakra Meditation when we blink it. So we'll go Fatal Push on the Slickshot show off before we draw. Loot a bunch off the Meditation. And then after this, I think we're going to look towards a win condition if we can, because we've pretty much got the loop set up now. We do need a 5th land, I think, just to be safe, but we don't want to keep untapped ones, I don't think. But either way, we can use Meditation, rebuy Fatal Push, and then we'll Fatal Push now just to dodge Spell Pierce or whatnot, and then we've got Orim's Chant ready for the upkeep. Oh wow, opponent just keeps it up, so we got that. That felt pretty good. Okay, so we're going second here. And yeah, I think we can keep this right. We don't have any black lands, but worst comes to worst, we could use Enlightened Tutor to put a black artifact land to the top. Which, I mean, I'm going to lead on Ponder first, just to see if we can find a black land naturally. And I think we're going to shuffle and draw. Okay. So I think we're going to set a stop during the upkeep here and an Enlightened Tutor for a black land. I was really hoping that we'd be able to draw one naturally, and then we could use Enlightened Tutor in order to find a Estrid's Invocation, but I think with having Fatal Push here and the opponent having 2 creatures and drawing Fire Nation Occupation, we just have to get a black land here, and then we're going to Fatal Push the Slickshot Shove, because that is definitely the card that can scale quicker, or the quickest, I guess. And then next turn, we could either go Fire Nation Occupation, make a token into Meditation, rebuy Fatal Push, plus play Fatal Push, but my issue with doing that is that playing Fire Nation Occupation now makes creature removal like Ribald Shanty live, and if they've got Ribald Shanty plus Chorus, I don't really want to enable that early if I can avoid it. I typically want to get Chakra down first, especially because if we draw an Invocation, we can potentially get it, it's much more easy to set it up. Nation Occupation isn't the priority here. If the Fire Nation Occupation made flying tokens or tokens with reach that we could chump block this Symmetry Sage with, then I think I would put it into play just to soak up a bit of damage, but I typically prefer to get Chakra in play first because it just opens up more top decks being good. Like I said, it also means that if they do have any, removal that can only target creatures, then we're good. Oh wow, okay, we did draw the Invocation, so I'm very happy that we went for the Meditation first here. Gonna lead on Fatal Push, gonna do it now just so that they can't as easily cast stuff like Wizard's Lightning during their turn, and also, we would want to cast the Invocation anyway, so I don't really want to get hit by Spell Pierce if I can avoid it. Okay, there is Wizard's Lightning. And again, I want to play the land that isn't going to deal us damage, and then we can Meditation here, get back Fatal Push again, and then we do have a potential issue here where they can just go haste and kill us. Oh wow, okay, just put Gigantha into hand, that's huge. So now we can go Meditation again, rebuy Enlightened Tutor, and we could have upkeeped Enlightened Tutored, but we already have the win condition in hand, so I don't really think we need to do that. I'm going to lead on Ponder here just to see what we find, because this is going to, dig us quite a few ways through the deck. I could also see maybe an argument for going for Fire Nation Occupation and just holding Fatal Push up. This is quite an interesting pickup, though, because now we can do the same thing, right? We found an untapped land. I really, I don't want to shock when we're at 4, because then we're just dead to Chain Lightning and Wizard's Lightning, which we've seen they're running both. But now we can pass with Nation Occupation and Fatal Push up. The key now is just trying to find an Orim's Chant, or Silence also would do the trick if they haven't already got a creature in play by that point, but Yeah, that's another big reason why I wanted to go for Ponder there, because it gives us a good chance of finding an Orim's Chant or a Silence between the, looking 3 cards deep, as well as the 2 loots off Meditation. I'm kind of tempted to push my own token here, but if I then lose to them playing a creature, I'm going to feel really stupid. So I think we should just hold off on that. It does enable them to use. So I'm just trying to think whether we want to copy the Nation Occupation, and I think I actually will here, because I just want to get on the board and start closing the game out as quickly as possible. I don't want to give the opponent time to find, 2 pieces of burn here. And we've seen they're running, Chain Lightning and Wizard's Lightning as well. So I think my game plan here is to basically just hold up Fatal Push, use Enlightened Tutor during the opponent's end step to get 2 extra tokens here. If they play any creatures, then Fatal Pushing them is going to be really nice as well. Okay, that's a bit annoying, because I would have loved for them to do that during their turn, and then we can push our own creature in response, which reduces their chorus amount. Yeah, so they don't draw as many cards off this. Hymn to the Ages, for example, and we would then get 2 more tokens. But because they did it during our end step, we wouldn't get the tokens off it. So it is a little bit annoying here that they didn't put any creatures in play, because we didn't get to use any of our Fatal Pushes. But it is face up, so kind of makes sense for the opponent not to just do that straight away. So we do get 2 tokens here, and we get the extra Meditation, which is kind of nice. I think we'll be all right with 2 Fatal Pushes here, and then interesting what we want to pick up here. I think I'm going to go for Porcine Portent, but I could also see an argument for getting another Estrid's Invocation, for example, but Portent gives us another piece of removal, and it gives us another win condition. And very importantly, it gives us a way to kill Gigantha, because they still have that Swift Spear's Teachings buff on the stack, or, available. So if they then run out Gigantha, they'd have haste, and then we could be in trouble at full life. So I want to have an answer to the Gigantha as well. Okay, there is Soulscar Mage, so now I'm a little bit less worried about the Gigantha, so maybe the Portent wasn't as necessary, especially when we're getting tokens into play. Okay, now they're running out their creatures, which I'm happy about. So they attack, and they try and clear the way for the Soulscar Mage, but we have Fatal Push. They also know that we have Portent. We're going to produce 2 more tokens here, so wow, okay, yeah, opponent just keeps it up. So post-sideboard, we definitely want the temporary lockdowns here, because it's just so good against basically their entire deck, and then we'll trim on Ponders, and then I think pretty much happy to run it back. I don't think there's anything else that's really that great here, and Ponder is just a generically useful... Well, the first Ponder is probably more useful than any of the other sideboard cards that we've got left, so... But yeah, this can be a tricky matchup, because they do have some instant speed cards that can play through the lock, especially if they get creatures down early and we're reliant on Silence. That can also be an issue. But this hand looks pretty decent, right? We've got Orim's Chant to limit their ability to buff the Soulscar Mage. Unless they want to use... a Wizard's Lightning face here. Oh, which they do, okay. But typically, since the release of Ponder, a lot of their cantrip stuff has moved to sorcery speed, which means outside of Wizard's Lightning, and Flame of Anor, they don't really have that much instant speed stuff to buff it. Now, this will give them a clear turn here, and we are taking damage off our lands here, which isn't ideal. Silent Clearing being our 4th land also isn't ideal. Oh, wow. Okay, I'm very happy to see that. I thought we were going to take a lot of damage this turn, but thankfully they just put Gigantha into hand, so we'll use the Portent here, and then next turn we can go Meditation, rebuy Orim's Chant. So as long as they don't have a crazy explosive turn this turn, we might be alright, but again, this is one of those situations where having Pain lands in the deck is a little bit awkward, because... Oh, okay, not anymore now we've drawn a Shock land, but... Yeah, having to pay... a life every time we use Orim's Chant is a little bit rough. And I guess actually I should have waited to shock in the Hallowed Fountain here, because had they had Spell Pierce, we literally just did 2 damage to ourselves for nothing, because we don't have any other castable 1-drops. So that was a mistake on my part, but hopefully it won't end up mattering. So, I mean, ideally we don't really want to be taking damage off the Silent Clearing, but I'll take the 5th land while we have it available, right? There will be some sequences where I need a 5th land for certain lines, so here Like for example, being able to play around Spell Pierce here is a pretty big one. We'll see if they have it. Oh, okay. That's a pretty good line for the opponent, because if you play Invocation with no other targets, then it doesn't blink itself during the upkeep anymore. So now we're in a bit of a sticky situation where we don't have a way to loop the silences anymore. But having said that, the nice thing about Chakra Meditation is it does loot us, so it helps us to dig towards more... Well, it makes it easier to find the next Estrid's Invocation, basically. Or, you know, Enlightened Tutor also helps us get there. So again, we'll grab an Orim's Chant. And the nice thing here is, especially while they've got the Swift Spear's Teachings buff available, that we just stop them casting creatures. So we found another Silence, which is nice. You know, we basically just want to dig towards Estrid's Invocation or Enlightened Tutor now. But, you know, we'll take the opportunity to get Fire Nation Occupation in play here. So we get a 2/2 token. I mean, again, this does enable their Ribald Shanties, and they haven't really been doing much. I mean, there is a chance they just have sorcery speed stuff in hand. That could be why. Not going to play out the Seachrome Coast because we obviously want to loot it away here for just basically anything better. I think basically every card in the deck will be better at this point. Even a Silent Clearing, which isn't ideal. I think I will also crack the Silent Clearing we've got available. You know, even though I don't love Pain Lands in this deck, because when we're trying to repeat loops every single turn, it does deal you a lot of damage. But these are the sorts of spots where it is useful to have access to it. So here, I think we can afford to run out Porcine Portent. Again, we can play around Spell Pierce. Not that we need to here, really. I think if they did have Spell Pierce, I'd probably let it go, because we can't really afford to be shields down going into their turn, especially when they have Swift Spear's Teachings nerf. Not nerf, the buff available. And I'm going to go for First Little Pig. I mean, again, we could have gone for Second Little Pig to dodge Wizard's Lightning or Chain Lightning, but I do feel like they could have Graveyard Hate in Artifact or Enchantment form, so just having First Little Pig in play does give us an out to that. And now we can also use the Firebending mana to draw a card off Silent Clearing while still having enough mana out for Orim's Chant. Okay, and there's Estrid's Invocation. Perfect. So I think we should be alright here. The main concern I'm worried about would be... Wow, okay, Wizard's Lightning not going face is big. It's interesting they did go after the First Little Pig. It makes me... Oh, no, wait, I thought it was the opponent's turn. But yeah, it does make me think they might have Artifact or Enchantment Graveyard Hate for them to prioritise taking out the First Little Pig rather than going face, but... I guess they're worried if we set the lockup, Chain Lightning can't go face anymore. So plus it also limits our ability to close the game out a little bit. So I guess it does make sense. But okay, so we're going to run out the Invocation here, and if they do have actually we should have played the Vault of Whispers first if I'm going to play around Spell Pierce. Okay, opponent just scoops it up, so we got there. Nice. Okay, so we're going first here, and I think that hand's too reliant on Ponder. On a 6, this might seem like a very greedy keep, but I think Ponder does see, you know, pretty far deep, and having 4 lands naturally is really useful. Oh, and we found Enlightened Tutor. Okay, so this is really nice. We obviously don't want these extra lands, but we can set a stop during the upkeep here. Okay, Underground Mortuary is interesting. I don't know what we're up against here. But now we can go Enlightened Tutor and shuffle away those extra 2 lands, which is pretty nice. Now we can get Chakra Meditation. We still have enough mana here to go Mortuary Grave into Ponder. And then next time we can go Chakra Meditation, rebuy Enlightened Tutor. And we've now found Orim's Chant as well. Thinking about it, maybe I'm supposed to put Fatal Push top. Actually, I don't know, because even if they thought... I was thinking if they thought seize away Orim's Chant, we might be in trouble, but we're more worried about them thought seizing away Chakra Meditation. Gilded Goose, so against Yawgmoth, maybe? I mean, I'm surprised to see the Surveil land. By the way, we'll go Chakra Meditation here, and we'll go for Enlightened Tutor, and now we have the opportunity, or the option at least, to go Enlightened Tutor for Estrid's Invocation during the upkeep, but I guess it depends on what they do here, really. We might want to use Orim's Chant next turn, and then go for Enlightened Tutor, just to limit what they do. Samwise, okay, so Okay, into Innkeeper. So I am pretty worried about that. So I think I'm going to go Enlightened Tutor for Invocation here. And then... Sorry, maybe I'm supposed to keep that Otawara over the Silent Clearing, but we're going to play whatever we draw as a land here anyway, and I think we value it anyway. But yeah, rather than just running out the Invocation, I'm going to go for Upkeep Orum's Chant here, because it doesn't play around Chord of Calling, but if they don't have Chord, this is going to really limit their ability to combo off, and, you know, we still are good to go Invocation plus Orum's Chant next turn. We can Fatal Push here to limit the damage we take and get rid of Samwise as well. The main card I am worried about here, though, is Chord of Calling, right? Because we can Orum's Chant during the upkeep. They could chord for a sack outlet and then chord for a Cauldron Familiar. They could also potentially go Chord of Calling for a sacrifice outlet and then keep drawing, discard Cauldron Familiar to hand size and win that way. So I like taking out the Samwise because it limits their options of Chord of Calling and shuts that down as a possibility as well. So now we're going to go Invocation, copy Chakra Meditation, and get back the Orum's Chant. And again, I don't love... we'll get back Silence here rather than Orum's Chant, just in case... I mean, it doesn't really matter because we're not going to be kicking the Orum's Chant anyway, but it is a bit annoying having to pay a life every single time on the Silent Clearing. But you've got to remember, the Silent Clearing slot didn't used to be a land, and having the fourth land here is so important for our proactive game plan. So while it can be annoying in spots like this, I think it's just so important to have a high land count so that we can consistently find our fourth land, because so many of our lock lines involve having 4 or often 5 lands, right? If we want to go Invocation into kick Orum's Chant, then we need 5 lands. If we want to go Fire Nation Occupation into kick Invocation... kick Orum's Chant, then we need 5 lands as well. So you really do need a high land count for this deck to work well, especially with Enlightened Tutor. By the way, we'll go copy the Meditation, get back Orum's Chant, because now we can potentially kick it, especially if we draw a land here. Okay, interesting. So, I mean, we'll play the Invocation again, and then we've got a backup. We don't have to worry as much about instant speed enchantment removal anymore. And I mean, I think Silence is the safer pick here, but from what we're up against, I don't think we really need to worry too much about, them having main deck Graveyard Hate. Although, again, maybe Chord of Calling, they'll have main deck Graveyard Hate. Especially if they're a 3-color deck, I don't think they're likely to have much instant speed enchantment removal either, right? I was thinking Boseiju is the main one, but... if they're running a 3-color deck, having room for more than a Boseiju, they've already got a Boseiju in play, so I very much doubt that they're going to, do that again. So we do want that Enlightened Tutor to either dig for a win condition like a Fire Nation Occupation, or potentially a temporary lockdown if the main thing we're worried about here is Chord of Calling. But it doesn't really make sense to do that over Estrid's Invocation, because we can just use Invocation to rebuy an Enlightened Tutor, but it is a little bit slower, so maybe with 2 Invocations we don't really need the third, and maybe I'm supposed to just keep the Enlightened Tutor here, but we can just rebuy it. And actually we can use this during the upkeep here, and I think I will. And I'm not sure whether I want to go for Fire Nation Occupation or for temporary lockdown here. Okay, we naturally drew the Occupation. Interesting. Well, that makes my decision a lot easier. Now we just go for temporary lockdown, get rid of their entire board, basically. Now let's just check the other options that we've got. I think it is just lockdown here, because that then does just shut off Chord of Calling as an out for them. And then we still have enough mana here to go temporary lockdown, get rid of everything, and then still go Orum's Chant during the upkeep, and then... they can Chord of Calling for X equals 1 if they draw another untapped land here. But this should, basically just stop them from doing anything for the rest of the game, I think. So now we sweep the board, we can Orum's Chant again, and then we've already got the Fire Nation Occupation here, which we can then also copy with the Invocations, to speed the win condition up a little bit. So we're going to loot away everything, basically, other than Nation Occupations, because we've only got 1 copy, so if we accidentally discard this, our only win conditions then are Kahira, which is really slow, and I guess Porcelain Portent as well, which we could get by rebuying an Enlightened Shooter. Okay, Guide of Souls is interesting. We haven't really seen much of their deck, to be fair. But either way, we rebuy Orim's Chant, rebuy second Orim's Chant just to have a backup, and then get the Nation Occupation in play, and then we should start closing the game out, especially because with this second Orim's Chant, we could potentially use both of our invocations to copy Fire Nation Occupation, and then the next Orim's Chant is going to produce 2 tokens, which helps us close the game out a lot quicker. So I think we'll discard the lands here. I'm not sure we need the 6th land for anything really, apart from maybe Portent plus kicked Orim's Chant. But again, without them having anything in play, we don't really need to kick the Orim's Chant. So they ship it back. Wonder if they'll discard a Cauldron Familiar. No, okay, Marionette Apprentice. So it looks like they might just be on like Abzan Sacrifice with access to Samwise. But here, since we have got the backup Orim's Chant, I think I'm going to get a little bit greedy and copy the Fire Nation Occupations. But this does speed up our clock quite a bit. Not only do we get an extra 2 tokens here, but we'll also get an extra... Well, sorry, we get an extra... Yeah, 2 tokens for copying it, and then we'll get an extra 2 tokens during the opponent's upkeep here as well. And then that's 6 power in play. This is just suddenly we get 3 tokens actually because of the original one. I forgot about that. So yeah, now we immediately have them on a 2-turn clock. And even if they do manage to get through the lock somehow, we're just way ahead on board. So yeah, opponent just scoops it up. That felt very good. So we didn't see much of the opponent's deck, but it looks like it's just Sacrifice with Samwise combos. So we definitely want the Torpor Orb, we definitely want the lockdowns, and I think that's pretty much it. We could also bring in Hearse to exile the Cauldron Familiar, but I feel like Torpor Orb just does the same thing but better. You know, not only does it shut off the combo itself, so it shuts off the Cauldron Familiar, it shuts off the Samwise, it shuts off... We obviously saw Guide of Souls and Marionette Apprentice from what they discarded, which Torpor Orb is excellent against both of them, so... Oh, I mean, naturally drew it. I was going to say, if we did have Enlightened Shooter, I think I would just get Torpor Orb, but now this is even better. We can silence turn 1, Torpor Orb turn 2, Meditation back the silence on turn 3, so pretty happy with this. Okay. I mean, I think we'll go for silence over Fatal Push here, because I don't think there's likely anything they can cast at instant speed to commit to the board at this point. You know, if Bowmasters was still viable, then maybe, but now we get to go Torpor Orb. Again, I'm not going to run out the Seat of the Synod ahead of the Shock land, because we likely would shock in the land next turn anyway. And if they do have Fragment Reality, we really don't want to open up the possibility of them using Fragment on our lands at this stage of the game. Well, you know, this early in the game would be really brutal, especially because we don't have any other lands. But yeah, Torpor Orb is going to be huge for us. It's going to shut off Guide of Souls, it's going to shut off Samwise, it's going to shut off, hopefully, a lot of the deck, including the Prosperous Innkeeper. So they attack in here. And I think at this point I can probably go for the Seat of the Synod, and we'll go Chakra Meditation, get back the silence, and then we should just be good to get the lock going next turn. And we have Torpor Orb in play already, which is going to really limit whatever they can do, you know, proactively. But we'll see what else they've got. Right, they have got a turn here to do something at the very least. Wow, okay, Marionette Apprentice. So Torpor Orb putting in work this game. So this is a little bit awkward here, because if we use Invocation here, we don't actually get any value off the Chakra Meditation ETB, but we do set it up for next turn, and we also get an extra loot as well, which is, you know, definitely relevant. Okay, so I think we'll pitch a land and another land here, because, you know, we've already got Silence, we've already got Fatal Push, we don't have Orim's Chant, so we don't need the extra mana to kick it yet. Okay, there is Beseiji, but I'm pretty happy for them to use it on the Torpor Orb rather than the Invocation now that we've got the lock set up. And now we can get a Swamp into play without taking any extra damage and push this Marionette Apprentice. Presumably they attack with everything, yeah. So we'll kill the Apprentice here. Get another 2 loots. And it would be nice to find Orim's Chant. But I guess with Fatal Push and Silence, it doesn't really matter too much. Silence is going to basically do the same thing anyway. And, you know, if we kill the Guide of Souls, we're only taking 1 damage a turn, even with this Innkeeper still in play. And we can also put Kahira into hand as well. So we'll ship it back. And might as well kick the Orim's Chant here rather than Silence plus Fatal Push. Another Invocation is interesting. So I think we can pitch Silence here. Do we need another land? I'm going to keep the land over the Fatal Push, honestly, because we can get Kahira into play here, which is going to stop them from attacking anyway, right? Maybe we didn't need the 6th land. Maybe that was a little bit greedy over the Fatal Push. But again, like I said, if we get Kahira into play here, I very much doubt they've kept in creature interaction against us. Could be a little awkward if we have. And now, since we drew Orim's Chant, or since we got Orim's Chant back, we can kick it here. I mean, we did basically pay 2 life there to, prevent them from attacking. So maybe I'm supposed to just not kick the Orim's Chant here, but okay, temporary lockdown's a sick pickup. Now we can just sweep the 2 creatures that they have got into play, and then Kahira can start connecting and closing the game out. And they're stuck on 2 lands as well, which is kind of brutal for them, but I think they would have struggled regardless here, really, unless they, have a lot of instant speed stuff, which is pretty unusual for sacrifice decks outside of Chord of Calling, maybe. But now, either way, we can go temporary lockdown, get rid of their Guide of Souls and Innkeeper, start attacking them with the Kahira, and then we've still got Orim's Chant here to just stop them every single turn. So we'll exile those 2, attack him with the Kahira. Then we'll keep this land in order to loot away. But yeah, I think we should be good here. Unless they, have instant speed stuff. I guess they could have another Boseiju, but again, in a 3-color deck, it's difficult to fit that many Boseijus in. So I imagine most of their other artifact and enchantment removal stuff is on creatures, especially if they're on Chord of Calling, which they obviously just can't play right now, unless they're running like Cathar Commando or something. Yeah, opponent just scoops it up, so we got there nice. That felt pretty good as well.